There's so many places on this property that have such different stories to tell. They're very pretty, very nice places, but you know, certain parts of the Lantana are so out of control, and you'll go through places where you could just go through with a hoe and just dig those bits out and whatnot, and then all of a sudden you're into areas like this that are just completely impenetrable without machinery. So it's one of those contrasts that we have to get control of, because the steepness of the property in certain places, although it's good usable land, makes it very difficult to use machinery in those areas very specific to that, and use it safely. Like I've used it, I'm very, very good on steep terrain, because that's what I learnt on, what I cut my teeth on. But where it can be very, very dangerous, I'm very good at it. But you've still got to remain very aware. And Lantana is one of those things. You can push Lantana, but you can't tell what's on the other side of it. So you can push it straight off a cliff and follow it. And that happens to a lot of people when they're trying to work with this sort of material. It's not very forgiving, and you can't really tell. That's where the tractor really falls into big problems, because at the end of that you can't see, and the pile ends up being 10 or 12, even 20 feet high in front of the machine. The machine's still capable of pushing it and still pushing it, but you can't tell when you ride off a embankment like this that's about 4 foot tall. If you come off it sideways, it's going to get you killed. You can see here is a perfect example of exactly what I talk about once it takes over, then it starts to climb. You can see it starting to climb up into those trees, and it's the perfect bridge for fire to go from being in the Lantana at the bottom of it and up into the trees. And this stuff burns like petrol. How more people, you know, keep allowing this stuff to grow without dealing with it is really dangerous, and it affects your property values so much. It takes away from what a property would be worth once it gets hold. And that's what our plan is, to start offering our services in the management of this material with machinery and cleaning it up, helping people to get it to a point where you can actually manage it. This used to also have a lot of banana plantation on it. So this is an old banana packing shed, Australian style, very make do. But even here the Lantana's taken over. I'm getting a little bit antsy here because this wasn't that far from where that big snake was. I'm not a big fan of snakes. I'd prefer to be in the machine than on the ground with them. And unfortunately the poor bugger, I don't like killing anything, which I didn't kill him, but I give him a little bit of a tune up with the tractor accidentally. I didn't know where he was and rolled him around a little bit, but he was okay. Just knocked a few scales off him. But I wasn't his favourite person in the world. And when the snake's, you know, 10 feet long, it's not a very good thing to make him very unhappy. I went to touch his tail to move him out of the way, and he said, "Oh, I don't think you should do that." And I said, "Yes, sir. You're perfectly welcome. I'll leave you alone." So yeah, that's what the packing shed looks like over there. We're not sure what we're going to do completely with it yet. We may tear all the floor out so that the horses can go in there to use it for shelter. We've got to modify the barn, or like the shed up the top at the house, for the barns. I'm not going to leave them down here that far from the house, because the house is way up there. So at this point, that's how I intend to do it for this time being. There's some white ants. This is a lot of the jointing system that a lot of the bushies in Australia use with fencing wire. You just about build anything with fencing wire. So yeah, very, very strong construction. It works very, very well. Very quick to put together and very robust. It works really well. So we'll be building all of our sheds and things out of a lot of the timber that we already have on site. That's why we want to do it that way, so we can get it to be more self-sufficient. And like I said before, we'll plant what we've taken down. So that's what that Lantana looks like when it's completely lost control of. In 1 month since we've looked at buying the property, this stuff has just gone insane. It's just blowing out incredibly. So this is up towards the back up here where I had bought the tractor and found the snake sunning himself in the sun. You couldn't see anything in front of the tractor while you're pushing this stuff down the hill, but you've got all the cuts and embankments which make it very exciting when you drive off the edge of those things. Although at this point here I knew where they were, but there's a lot of undercut gullies and things up through here which make it very dangerous when you're trying to pull something backwards down a hill and it starts dropping wheels into very deep ravines. It gets very exciting very quickly because you don't know whether it's going to continue to go over. So it's not the right machine for this type of work, but it's all I have right at this point until settlement's finally finished with, and then we can get the excavator in here, get stuck into it, get serious about pulling it up into piles, turning a lot of it into ash, and then mixing it through our soils and composts and putting it back on the land. But getting that water under control is equally as important as getting the Lantana under control. It's equally as important as those three things. They all have an important part of it. But I'm looking forward to it. It's a big job. It's a very big challenge, but it certainly is a lovely spot. I can't wait to see the horses running up and down the hills here. There's a lot of food forest trees here, guavas. Over here we've got guavas there. We've got cactus up the top, prickly pear. We've got mangoes and nuts and all sorts of different things. Lots of lemons and oranges, mulberries. I intend to plant a lot of mulberry trees for the horses because they like the leaves and whatnot. But you know, I have to keep them off them for a while. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for joining me for the tour, and I'll let you know and show you more as we go along. I'll show you the excavator here once we get it cranked up and working. So talk to you soon. So the steepness of this area up in here onto the next property shows the amount of problem that we have with water cascading and roaring down through here, which we'll have to take control of to take the load off those lower dams. It just absolutely roars down through here, although we haven't been here when it rains yet. Now that's the track down the boundary of the property, and I've already knocked the tops off those ruts up there. They were absolutely enormous. They'd come up to your hip, they were that deep. So we have to get that all under control, take a lot of control of the water so it can do some good work rather than all the damage that's being done at this point. That snake is about 10 feet long and living in one of the holes up in a different part of the property, like one of those holes on the embankment there. So it was a very scary thing to see him out there sunning himself. It's going to be a very pretty property once it's all cleared up and all this stuff's under control. I will continue this bench that's here pretty much right the way through along this property, which will be a long bench, and then I'll work my way around certain trees that I want to keep through those sorts of areas, so I can minimise the damage overall. There is a lot of good trees on this property, even though there is some that are a lot of chop and drop wattles and things like that, which are good as far as the nitrogen and stuff goes, but they don't live for a very long time. But I've got to get the water under control because it tears through these bottom dams. There's just such a big catchment area up into the back of the property and the properties above us that I've got to get control of that water, or else the same problems that the previous owners had will be continuing to be our problems. Water's such a wonderful thing, but it can be one of your worst nightmares if it's completely out of control. And even in here, the Lantana makes it very, very difficult because it's so interwoven in amongst the trees that you can't really bring a very big machine in here and then do a lot of good because it's so fiddly. But you can't leave the Lantana continuing because it grows quicker than you can pull it out. It is an incredibly invasive weed.